Joining us now for our brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ion. Good morning, Vimbai. Good morning. Great to hear your voices. Let me tell you about what's happening around the world. Let's start in the United States, where we're just 1 week away from Election Day. And a federal investigation is underway after hundreds of already casted ballots have been destroyed in a series of fires. 2 of those fires took place in Portland, Oregon, and another fire took place in Vancouver, Washington State. And as I said, hundreds of ballots have been destroyed as a result of these fires. Federal investigation is going on the way, but it is worth noting that evidence from these devices show that these fires are connected. What we're seeing in Portland, Oregon and in Vancouver, Washington State are both connected, and also they're connected to a third incident which took place earlier on in the month on October 8th, also in Vancouver, Washington. So as I said, investigations are still underway. It is believed that at some point, especially when a suspect or a suspect's vehicle was seen leaving the scene in Portland, investigators have been made aware of that, but as it stands, no arrests have been made, no identification made, but it is believed that all of these different fires attacking these ballot boxes are connected, and they have been reported to be a direct attack on democracy. Let's move on to the Middle East, where the Israeli parliament has voted to effectively ban the operations of UNRWA, the UNRWA. It's the UN's Palestinian Authority. They're the main UN body in Gaza, responsible for delivering humanitarian services and humanitarian aid. And a lot of their operations is heavily dependent on Israeli forces, because Israeli forces are going to be the ones who need to allow them access to these different areas, to these different peoples. But with the coming of this vote, it's very unclear how aid is going to be delivered. So there is going to be genuine concern over the dire consequences of yet another roadblock in terms of the humanitarian protection on ground for the people of Gaza. It's unclear whether or not the United Nations are going to push back, whether or not they will have a plan in place on whether they are going to be able to continue their operations. But as you can imagine, this decision makes things very difficult in an already hostile environment. Now, to make it clear, UNRWA staff will no longer have the legal immunity as well within Israel, and the agency's headquarters, which were based in occupied East Jerusalem, have also been closed. So you can imagine that this is quite an aggressive turning away from the humanitarian aid that the UN seeks to deliver to the people in Gaza. And then lastly, a very interesting story coming out of India. Now, a few states, especially states that are in control by the ruling BJP party, have been making moves to criminalize the contamination, the intentional contamination of food. What they are proposing are lengthy prison sentences and hefty fines of up to $1,000 in, of course, which would translate to around 100,000 Indian rupees. But this is because there is quite I wouldn't call it a stigma, but clearly lots of videos have been circulating on social media in India and of course across the world that shows poor sanitary environments when it comes to the preparation of food. In addition to that, there have also been videos circulating of a woman who lived in a residential building as a house help who was recorded mixing urine into food. Now, many people have welcomed this decision to criminalize the intentional contamination of food and of course prioritizing food safety, but there's also a genuine concern that this information, these decisions will have a knock-on negative effect on subsections of Indian society. You'll remember that India is a country that is broken down by a caste system and then also separated when it comes to lines of religion and culture, especially religion. For example, the video that circulated of the woman mixing urine into the food, there was fake and false news spreading across Indian circles reveals that the person responsible was a Muslim, and by extension, Muslim Indians were being targeted. But fact checkers actually came out and said, actually, the woman in question was a Hindu. So this is where the concerns come from when it comes to the criminalization of intentionally contaminating food. But as I said, it's something that we're seeing many times when it comes to India and the preparation of food on the street. Perhaps there is a lack of conversation, a lack of sensitization, of education, of understanding the ramifications for food when it is poorly prepared, especially when it is given out to people. But it is very interesting to see that India is taking this very seriously. Also, it is worth noting that though they are taking food safety concerns very seriously, which is welcomed. It is clearly a very serious issue. 600 million infections take place in India every year, and they result in 400,000 deaths, all connected to food poisoning, poor food preparation, poor food sanitation. So many people, you can imagine, would be welcoming this move from different states within India. Dr. Rubin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these stories before we move on to the papers.
Okay, yeah, well, you already, identified the two major issues with regard to India. Two states affected, Uttar Pradesh in the north, and also Uttar Pradesh. Now, yes. In Uttar Pradesh, we're told that, a fine has been imposed of about 100,000 rupees. And all of this, got generated when videos were played. But the issue again is that India is an ethnically, culturally diverse country. So in the video in question, in both states are under the control of the BJP, the ruling party. At the end of the day, the controversy was, whether the people involved in this contamination were Muslims or they are Hindus. And opposition parties in both states are saying, look, this looks like an attempt to give Muslims a bad name. So that's the major concern there. But these two states have already introduced fines. In Uttar Pradesh, they are planning to come up with stringent laws. But the other implication is for public health, which you already identified, saying that about 600 million infections, per annum. And, the contamination they're talking about, death, speech, urine. Obviously, that will have implications for public health. But the cultural dimension of it is the more sensitive part, so that it doesn't result in clashes. Now, as for the decision taken by the Knesset yesterday in Israel, now there is a 1967 treaty signed, for the establishment of the UNRWA, United Nations Road and Works Agency, Relief and Works Agency in Israel. Now, Israel now is saying two things. There were two votes. One was 89-10, 89-7. The other one was 92-10. In one regard, they're saying that the UNRWA is a terrorist party. It's a terrorist body. The second one, they're saying they do not want the UNRWA to operate anywhere inside Israel or anywhere in any of the occupied territories, whether in Gaza or in East Jerusalem or the West Bank. So the vote succeeded yesterday. The implication is that the 1967 treaty has just been revoked. Two, that the UNRWA has been declared a terrorist body. But, well, the bigger implication, of course, is that about 300,000 workers under the umbrella of the UNRWA are losing their jobs. What will happen to the humanitarian aid, the major humanitarian agency in Israel and Gaza, has now been suspended? And it's therefore not surprising that Antonio Guterres has said, look, this body is irreplaceable, it's important, it's indispensable, because we're talking about humanitarian aid. And you find many countries of the world, Canada, United Kingdom, all of them condemning the decision that has been taken in the Knesset. That's the Israeli parliament yesterday. Well, but I think there's also this cultural, ethnic angle to it. The Israelis are saying the UNRWA is not a humanitarian agency, that is political, that is linked to Hamas. And that the body has been saying, oh, the Palestinians could return to their ancestral homelands. You recall that that body itself was formed a year after Israel was established in 1948. So this relief agency has been there since 1949. So these are some of the issues. As for the ballot papers, the drop ballots in the United States, well, that issue has been on the table since 2020. And that's why in some of the states, like North Carolina, South Carolina, North Dakota, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, you know, there's a rejection of these drop boxes ahead of the elections. Even the fact that those boxes are protected with fire-resistant systems, you still find that you have had this incident that has happened. But the FBI is investigating, and you know that may well make the difference.
Gracie, thank you very much for your comments, Dr. Rubin. Let's move on to the newspapers, and then we will come back for some more discussion. Now, the front page of This Day newspaper, as well with the vast majority of Nigerian newspapers today, focus on electricity. So if we take a look at the front page of This Day, and of course, as I said, many other papers, they are focusing on the blackout in the north. That's the headline. President Tinubu has also directed the speedy restoration of power. The New Telegraph now reports on northern governors having rejected the proposed tax reform amendment. They say that it's against the North's interest and they're not interested in it, and rather they think that the federal government should be focusing on restoring power in their regions. If we take a look at the front page of the Daily Trust now, which also leads with the rejection by the northern governors as well as monarchs, there is a response from the federal government which is saying that electricity in their regions should be restored within the next 5 days. Now, The Guardian is also looking at electricity, the grid, and it reports that the military has been deployed to protect workers as they restore electricity assets in these regions. And of course, if we look at the Leadership newspaper and the Daily Independent, both are reporting, especially the Daily Independent, they're reporting that the federal government is to establish a super grid to guarantee stable electricity. Looking at the Daily Independent too, there's also news that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Abbas Tajuddin, says the House is working towards a joint ticketing in elections, equal seats and equal citizenship rights to foreigners married to Nigerian women. And then The Punch, lastly, leads with the federal government inviting unions for discussions as striking has affected operations in Nigerian universities. Let's take a look at some African newspapers now. And the Daily Trust of Kenya is looking again at state capture. This time, how police are using call data records to identify suspects, which many people are saying breaches customer privacy and also puts people in a dangerous position. And then the Daily Graphic of Ghana rather, leads with the US imposing visa restrictions on any individual responsible for undermining democracy in the country. You'll remember that Ghana is going to elect a new president on the 7th of December. And then moving on to some world papers, the UK's Daily Telegraph joins many UK dailies this morning to look at the impacts of this week's budget will have on the National Health Service, the NHS. Now, the consensus is that despite the boost of money that Chancellor Rachel Reeves will give the health service, there will be tax rises in the budget, and they won't be the only ones. They certainly won't be the last ones. The paper reports a £35 billion tax raid is on the way, which will see national insurance contributions for employees increase, as well as capital gains tax also going up. The Daily Telegraph also on its front page reports on the fertility rates in the United Kingdom falling to the lowest rate since records began, which actually brings me to the front cover of the Shanghai Daily, which coincidentally also reports on births and fertility support. China has introduced 13 measures, including legally mandated maternity and paternity leave, maternity insurance for flexible workers, and a maternity subsidy system. Those are the newspapers from around the world. Ayo, I would love to hear your thoughts.
All right, thank you very much, Adefemi, thanks. I just wanted a quick thought on the arson and fires in the United States with regards to the ballot boxes. I want to point out the role of rhetorics and sometimes statements that could be seen as insightful by candidates and how it affects the people. I say this because last week in Phoenix, a 35-year-old man was charged with arson in connection with a ballot box being burnt. He did say that it was not politically motivated, so that people who are saying that perhaps it's someone from a different party who is behind it, not that, but that sometimes when there are concerns around voter fraud, domestic extremists could take that as an advantage or a motive to then begin to act in this manner. So just to mention that this is how the kind of conversations we've had during this election is affecting the American people and the quality of elections that we're seeing. And also, like you mentioned, a direct attack on democracy. Just to say that that's so, the impact of that. But coming back home to Nigeria, like you said, the news around the blackout in the north has dominated most papers, as it should be. The 19 governors especially, and I'll just say that it's important as well when we look at the players in national discourse, the role that subnationals play. It's great that they're coming together now, having conversations around the necessary infrastructure that must be invested in the north and how they are disproportionately affected by certain challenges. We've talked about this in recent times, about how we must not neglect the north. They are plagued with high levels of poverty, illiteracy in terms of education, lack of access to education. So it's important to have these conversations. Then I think it's interesting as well, their take on the tax reforms, as the president has transmitted to the National Assembly, saying that it would negatively affect the north. This is because the proposal is for value-added tax to be for a derivation-based model for value-added tax, meaning that it won't just be spread the way it is currently. For instance, alcohol, which has been talked about a lot, that's not consumed in the north or banned in the north, they shouldn't get a share of the taxes, is what, that's an example of that. So it's debatable, it's been, contentious, so it will be great to see how far this will go in the conversations.
Yeah, but still on the tax reform bill, of course, the Northern Governors Forum had quite a robust tete-a-tete yesterday. And I was still, again, on the controversy from the derivation model. Of course, people are saying that maybe it's time for the North to also come together and see what incentives they can create for companies to headquarter in Northern companies. Because, of course, the big bone of contention here is the fact that companies are supposed to remit to where their headquarters, as opposed to where the goods are consumed or where the VAT is used. So, the back and forth there is, this continued conversation that we're seeing, and it's an unfortunate conversation because Nigeria is one nation after all, so we shouldn't be so consumed in, where resources come from and where they're spent. There needs to be a greater sense of national unity and nationhood. And now very quickly to the India story, which, really struck a chord with me because I traveled to New Delhi a few years ago and I got what they call Delhi belly. So it's actually known as Delhi belly when you go to India and you eat food and you get food poisoning. It's very well known. Before you travel, actually, if you go and see your doctor will tell you that you're traveling to India, you might want to take some, this type of medication and so forth, because it's highly likely that your stomach, if you have a sensitive stomach, will get inflamed with what's known globally as Delhi belly now. So, great to see that there's some focus on it, some attention to it, and hopefully something will be done. And then lastly, I believe there was mention, was it from the Independent newspaper, with regards to equal citizenship this one is for Niger husbands, not for Niger wives, but I think this is a conversation that certainly needs to keep on going, just around the access to both residency and citizenship for spouses of Nigerians, whether they be male, whether they be female. I don't think it should matter whether you're married to a male Nigerian or to a female Nigerian. I think there just needs to be uniformity when it comes to the citizenship legislation.
Okay, maybe I should comment on the major issue in the front pages of the newspapers in England this morning, which is Rachel Reeves tomorrow presenting the budget. October 30 is the date. And the whole controversy about that budget is that Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party are both saying, well, we're not running away from our promise to take care of the working class, but we have a 20 billion hole that the Conservatives left behind that we need to plug. for us to ensure economic growth. Now that figure has changed repeatedly. Today is 20 billion, tomorrow is 22 billion, next tomorrow is 40 billion. The other day it was 50 billion pounds. But in other words, what they want to do is to raise taxes. What they want to do is to cut public spending. And NHS is one of the major areas they're focusing on. NHS is going to get 4% of the bill, about 7 billion. Now they're going to raise the money from increasing income tax, increasing national insurance, putting a VAT on private school funds, fees that are paid. And this has caused a lot of controversy in terms of people saying this will punish employers of labor, this will punish the working class, this will create a lot of anxiety, and that the NHS will not become necessarily more effective. Some improvement may be done. But Kestama is very resolute in saying that, look, he intends to take all the hard decisions up front and take the decisions so that he can ensure economic growth and prosperity. But in terms of the implications, we will get a chance to see the full details tomorrow when Rachel Reeves, places the budget on the table. In terms of the implications, well, the same working class that Labour says is trying to protect and encourage may well be the party that will bear the brunt. As regards capital gains tax, we're told many businesses are already pivoting away from England because capital gains tax could affect employment and all that. However, on the positive side, Labour is coming up with an employment bill which they say will give more powers, more authority to workers in workplaces. All of those details we will know tomorrow and thereafter in terms of impact. So thank you very much, Adefemi.
Well, thank you very much, Adefemi, for bringing us World Brief and reviewing today's newspapers around the world.